when were you born again? So, hold on, wait a minute. I said that wrong. You like that, right? When were you born again? Tell us again. When were you born, sir?
You didn't get that joke, Amy.
Yeah, I heard it.
I was born again.
Yeah.
I was born in 1945.
Wow, okay. So you were born in 1945, which is the last year of World War II. And we've seen a lot since then. So the questions I'm going to ask now is certainly not challenging your experience, because I wasn't around to know what was going on. And most people that are watching this were not around then. So this is really interesting to hear you say a couple things. First, you said it was fatherlessness. I'm using it as a catch-all term, but lack of fathers in the home even when you were growing up.
Correct.
And okay.
So that's no different.
All right. That's something that we're told sort of changed in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. But you're saying from your experience that was not the case. But the difference was what? The strong social bonds, the respect.
Strong mothers. Strong mothers.
Strong mothers. Okay.
Strong grandmothers. And if you were lucky enough, let's say that, because there were some of us, if you're lucky enough that you had fathers in your home, right? Most of the time, all the father did was sit around and read the newspaper. So the mother had to do everything. And then there were some lucky families, let's say in the middle class, that had their fathers in the home. And then what they did was they escaped the neighborhoods to move up on 16th Street or something, what they call the Gold Coast, or get big homes. So they left the neighborhood, so we didn't have their guidance. And then single mothers were ones, for the most part, left behind. You got people living in public houses in Washington, D.C. right now that's been living in there for decades. They never left public housing. And the children are growing up in public housing.
You said, some people are going to look at this, I'm going to tell you, and they're going to say, you're romanticizing the past. You know, when you say things like, the women were, pretty much nobody was doing bad things. I mean, you're not saying that, but you're kind of saying that. The women weren't as, I don't want to use the word promiscuous, but I don't know another word to think of at this moment, but you get where I'm going. You're saying that there was a moral clarity and structure in place then that's not there now. Now, some people are going to look and say, no, they were doing it then. They did it quietly, or it was done under the rug. How do you answer those people who are going to watch it and say, is that really how it was?
Well, for a person to tell me who's 30 years old to question me on how it was, when you don't have a clue how it was, you have to live there to understand. And I'm telling you, this is the experience I lived through. I lived in segregation. I lived during segregation. So I lived at a time where all black people had to live together. I don't care who you were. All black people could not go into downtown Washington and sit down at a restaurant and have dinner. I lived through that time. I lived through the time where I had a public school 2 blocks from my house that was white. I had to catch a bus going past that public school to go up to the Northwest to go to a black school. I lived through those times. So how are you going to question me about what I know and I don't know? I lived through the times where I know what women are like. Because I lived through time. I lived through all generations of women. I know the way women were, like my mother. Even the women I messed around with. There was a difference between night and day. The women that I even dealt with.
When did it change? So we're talking 1945 to 2025, 80 years of experiences. When would, if you had to put your finger on the timeline of 80 years, where would you put your finger to say this was the point at which things started to turn?
I would highlight two things.
Yes.
I would highlight integration, and I would highlight the women's rights movement. Those two things. And let me tell you why I say that. For example, I used to travel, and I used to go down to the islands, right? And when I would go down there, at first, you see white women, and they be getting these island guys, and that's their toy while they're down there. And then they go back to Vermont and become good Christian mothers again. But black women will come down there. No, they don't have nothing to do with that. They come with their families on their own, and they didn't have nothing to do with that. Right? And then all of a sudden you're looking up, and Stella got a roof on. Black women never did that. They never did.
Never did what? I want to make sure we're on the same page, sir. What did they never do?
Okay.
Have sex with people other than their husband?
No, to come down, yes, to an island and start messing with those island guys and having sex with them. And going back home to their husbands. That was, I'm not saying maybe some black women, but that was not being done. And I used to go all the time. And I used to laugh for them. Look at these white women, and look at these black women, they got their kids. They're not doing no stuff like that. Then all of a sudden that started to change. Now the black women are going down there getting their groove on as much as white women. That's what I'm saying.
When did the change happen? When did you start seeing
I would say,
this shift?
I would say the women's rights movement.
Which was when?
I forget what year.
Okay.
When, I forget the name of the ladies. Gloria Steinbeck, I think. Whoever started. When they started about women can do everything a man can do. Women can do it too.
So let's step back for a second. When you were younger, did you know you were black or you were a man first?
Okay. There was no such thing as black when I was young.
You did say that. You're right.
There was no such thing. That never to change, bro.
What would you have been called?
Colored. Negro. Colored.
Negro and colored. Which one was more politically correct at the time?
Neither one.
Okay.
That's just the way it was. But you definitely, the only person who was called black back then was a truly black person.
There we go.
I remember riding on a trip. Well, my family's from Virginia. So my mother, we were riding on a car trip. And there was this little black girl walking down the street. And she could have been no more than 8 or 10 years old. And her hair was in twists or whatever it were. And my mother said, look at that poor child. I said, Mom, what are you talking about? Look at that poor child. Well, what's wrong with her? He said, look at that. What makes you think she's a poor child? Oh, see poor little black girl with those things in her head. My mother was just as, what's the word? When light-skinned black people look down on dark black people. What was that word? There was a word that was used for that.
Colorism?
No, there was a word that was used for that. I forget right now. So, in other words, my mother was looking at this little black girl because she was black. And she had these pleasures in her head. And that's what made her a poor little black girl. That's all. She don't know nothing about the little girl. That's the way light-skinned people used to think about dark-skinned people.
Which is a whole nother can of worms. So let's say Negro colored, I want to go back to that original question. Negro colored, sort of being used interchangeably.
And of course, nigger and boy.
Yeah, well, yeah. And did you become aware that you were a man or a male first? I'm going to your earliest memories. Or did you become aware of your race first?
I was not woke. My mother was a type of black person that she came from a part of Virginia where the black people and the white people all got along, right? My mother was never, my mother didn't even support Martin Luther King. Look at him causing all that trouble.
Really?
That's
Okay.
where my mother was. Yeah. So I didn't actually grow up understanding racism because it wasn't in my mother. It's like it wasn't in my house. She was constantly talking about it. It wasn't until I got older and out on my own, I said, oh, wait a minute. This is what's going on. I didn't know it as a child. And then my mother's side of my family were never slaves.
Okay.
My grandfather, well, there's another story about that. But my grandfather was a full-blooded Virginia Cherokee. So they weren't slaves, which I later did. I think I told you about that. Didn't I?
I don't think you did. You're going to tell me about some ancestry, perhaps research? I don't believe you told me about this.
Yeah. So about 5, 6 years ago, I said, let me do it. Just want to see my ancestry. So I did Ancestry.com. Come out in my ass was 48% white, 20% Cameroon, and 20% Nigeria. So I didn't believe, I said, that cannot be right. So then I did 23andMe. Came out the same thing. British, Ireland, and Scotland. So somebody did something, and they kept it a secret. I mean, look at my mother, my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me they don't look like white women.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that gave you advantages growing up in the 40s and 50s and 60s?
I didn't know it. I didn't know it until I was 75. And even
Until you were 75?
Right.
You didn't know what exactly?
That's my history. That I'm half white. I did not know that.
But you knew how you appear in the world. So even if you didn't know your genes, you knew what you looked like, you knew what your family looked like. So I'm not so much asking about...
I felt like they used to do black. I felt like a black man in a white world. That's the way I always felt.
Dr. King wrote a book in 1967. I'm sure you're familiar with it. Where do we go from here? Community or chaos? So for people who are listening and they're tracking with you, clearly you see what the problem is, and you've seen it over years. And like you said, you've been researching this for over 25 years. What is the next step? How do we get out of it?
Well, I'll tell you, the way I used to think, that there are only two solutions. One would be like the Italians, where when the Italians came over here, they were treated just as bad, if not worse at times, as black people. They were called wops, whatever name they were called, until the Italians got together and said, anything you do to me, and you keep calling me them names, I'm gonna do back to you worse. But I'm gonna do it to you and your family. I'll kill your whole family. The next thing you know, Italians are white. Left them alone. They left the Italians alone. Same thing with the Irish. They left the Irish alone because they were too violent. So I felt that was one, but we couldn't do that because in America, there's no such thing as a truly black person in America. That makes sense. Every one of us have genes from elsewhere. Not just black, not just from Africa. Every one of us have mixed genes now. So no one is 100% African today in America.
Yeah.
Unless you're just coming from Africa.
Yeah, and even just coming from Africa wouldn't, absorb you from that. I'm glad you pointed that out because many people who are in my generation or younger listen to those of other generations before us and think, hey, you're working on a framework that no longer exists. The world isn't black and white anymore, like you said. I mean, and it perhaps never was, but it was in a time of segregation. It would seem easier to put people in two buckets if you wanted to. Now you couldn't do it if you wanted to because, so many families are interconnected. And I'm not talking about their great, very great, who's somebody different, of a different race. We're talking aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, grandchildren now. So when people listen to this and they hear, black, white, black, but they're looking and they say, well, I don't really fit into that. I'm gonna use a big word here. I don't identify that way.
Well,
how do they get involved?
Well, it doesn't matter what way you identify as an individual. That doesn't matter. It's the matter the way a country identifies you. So you can identify yourself any kind of way you want. Like I can say, I'm half white, but I'm half black. No. You're black in America. You say you're black. You could have 25% black. Oh well, I'm 75% white. No. You're black in America. So it's not the way how you look at how you identify yourself. It's the way this system identifies you. Right? So you can think any way you want. That's the way the system is going to identify you. And then the other choice that I said, if we weren't going to go that route, then we all should become Americans. That shouldn't be black and white. It should be America as a country, and everybody who lives in America is American. Then you can't tell race or color. You're going to tell American till you actually see a talk to the person. That's the only choice we had. Those are the only two choices.